presentation.
Present temperature Times Square is 78 degrees. Relative humidity 62%. The temperature humidity index stands at 73, and the wind is calm. Marilyn Monroe is dead, apparently from an overdose of sleeping pills. But an investigation is now going on, and no final conclusion has been reached. Here is the statement from Deputy Coroner Cronkite.
On the basis of all the information obtained, it is our opinion that the case is a probable suicide.
Shakers. Yeah. 85.
For 23 years, there have been those who disbelieved the official verdict in the death of Marilyn Monroe. Sergeant Jack Clemens was the first police officer called to Marilyn's home that night.
No, it was not a suicide. Marilyn Monroe was murdered. There's no question about it.
Others contend there was a political cover-up. For hours, they say, news of Marilyn's death was withheld from police. The time was used, they believe, to spirit Marilyn's lover, Robert Kennedy, out of Los Angeles.
To get Bobby out of the whole scene, to get him out of town.
The curtain falls. Brief and simple rites mark the funeral of Marilyn Monroe.
The death of Marilyn Monroe was the start of a mystery. Talk of her relationship with the Kennedys enticed the malign interest of the mafia. A police inquiry was concluded in haste. A friend who tried to find out more was warned off.
There'll be a contract out for you.
Is there one now?
You better believe it. You better believe it.
The events surrounding Marilyn Monroe's death were completely covered up by the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, and top officials governing Los Angeles County.
A kiss on the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. A kiss may be grand, but it won't pay the rental on your humble flat, or help you at the automat. Men grow cold as girls grow old, and we all lose our charms in the end. But square cut or pear shape, these rocks don't lose their shape. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Now Minnesota's Governor Orville Freeman places in nomination
the great senator from the state of Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy.
July 1960, the Democratic Convention in Los Angeles. You must admit, said Marilyn Monroe, Jack Kennedy is much better than old uglies with no brains or beauty. Years before, Kennedy had been introduced to Marilyn by actor Peter Lawford.
He always wanted to meet the, quote, cheesecake figure, the sex goddess, Marilyn Monroe. It was one of his fantasies. And could Peter arrange for that?
Ladies and gentlemen, your nominee and the next president of the United States, John F. Kennedy.
The convention makes it a Kennedy victory by acclamation on the first ballot.
One of Kennedy's political advisors at that time, a man instrumental in bringing the convention to Los Angeles, was Peter Summers. In the 1960 campaign, he had the crucial job of handling relations with the TV networks. Summers says that he and other staffers already knew about the relationship with Marilyn. They saw it thrive in the heady atmosphere that surrounded Kennedy's nomination.
The campaign war.
Kennedy was nominated, and at that moment, not only the ground floor audience, the working group of the political effort, but all of the balconies, which were loaded with stars from the entertainment field, it became electric. It was energy that could have been greater than the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. He was so magical as he came to the podium, and trying to calm them down to even say thank you. Chills would run up and down your spines as you stood there. It was just a moment of magic.
The new frontier of which I speak is not a set of promises. It is a set of challenges. It sums up not what I intend to offer to the American people, but what I intend to ask of them. It appeals
While
to their
Kennedy talked of
pride.
the challenges and perils of the new frontier, advisors like Peter Summers calculated the political risks Marilyn Monroe might hold out for the candidate.
It appeals to our pride. Not our
Marilyn Monroe was in the audience along with, I couldn't begin to name all the stars 25 years later that were there. A strong friendship was developing at that time between Marilyn Monroe and Jack Kennedy.
Give me your help and your hand and your voice.
Our Marilyn was free at the time, and Jack Kennedy wasn't. The attraction that everyone had for Jack Kennedy, I think Jack Kennedy felt toward Marilyn Monroe, because Marilyn had the same charisma, beautiful person, quiet person, someone that could enjoy and appreciate the friendship that maybe only a Jack Kennedy could really give to her. Some people of staff said, you know, products are sold by star endorsement. Maybe the closeness of this will be of benefit for him being elected. The other side, of course, is you're not going to elect somebody president that is perhaps ignoring his wife or cheating on his family or something else. Yes, there was concern, and Marilyn was spoken to very frankly about it.
No.
The president was spoken to very frankly about it. There was great concern at the time. It could have destroyed him.
No, 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 no.
Jack Kennedy was just a young senator when he and Marilyn Monroe first walked on the beach at Malibu, unreported by the Hollywood press. Now they were stars in the twin firmaments of show business and politics. Marilyn represented danger. Jack's sister Pat Kennedy had married actor Peter Lawford. In the words of one acquaintance, suntanned, unruffled, with that peculiar impersonal friendliness of the overprivileged. A former cinema usher turned B-movie actor, Lawford was noted more for his affability than his talent. By 1960, on the eve of the Democratic Convention, the Lawfords were installed in a grand beachfront home in Santa Monica.
Pablo, it say here under weather report, it say a front of warm air is moving in from where? Jamaica. Moderately high barometric pressure will cover the northeast and the deep south. Small danger of fruit frost. Hot and humid nights can be expected.
Lawford was determined to please the Kennedys who had enveloped him. 625 Oceanfront, full of his showbiz cronies, became the relaxed headquarters for the president's affair with Marilyn Monroe.
People running through in bathing suits and bare feet, surfboards going through the house right out to the water, someone sitting out by the pool reading, someone else taking a walk on the beach. It was a nice lifestyle. And the president and all of us were sitting there in bathing suits, a shirt and open shirt. And it was a nice time.
We're having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave.
Years afterwards, Peter Lawford married Deborah Gould and told her all about the liaison with Marilyn.
It was a relationship, a sexual relationship for sure, but much deeper than that, if you know what I'm saying.
G, her anatomy makes the mercury.
293.
But with political power came enemies. Neither Kennedy nor Lawford had the slightest idea the house was bugged. There were microphones everywhere.
They were placed under carpets. They were placed in chandeliers and in ceiling fixtures. You know, you would have to look for the logical place to place the equipment. You have to gain entry also by either picking a lock or making some other kind of entry. As far as the wiretap is concerned, that's not something that the Secret Service in that date and time could pick up, because you could wire a telephone 5 miles from a location. You didn't have to be right there.
Otash's men parked themselves on the beach beside Pacific Coast Highway, looking for the strongest signal from microphones hidden inside the house.
The conversation that came across the receiver was music, people talking, and it would fade in and fade out. And I then beginning to recognize the voices, the Bostonian accent and Marilyn Monroe, and I heard the word the president call Marilyn, Marilyn, or Marilyn calling the president Prez.
Danoff now claims he was shocked to discover that the target of the operation was the President of the United States.
The footsteps left the living, which I assume was the living room, and went into the bedroom where there was another transmitter which picked up all the activity in the bedroom, which was cuddly talk and taking off the clothes and the sex act in the bed. You can hear the springs squeaking and so on and so forth.
One of the customers for the tapes, Danoff believes, was baseball star Joe DiMaggio, Marilyn's former husband, concerned lest her rich and powerful friends might somehow hasten her emotional destruction. But the real customer, it seems, was not in the least concerned with Marilyn's well-being. Jimmy Hoffa, head of America's huge transport union, the Teamsters, hated the Kennedys. To them, Hoffa was criminal, corrupt, hand in hand with the mafia. They wanted him in jail, he wanted his revenge.
Yes, they came in all talcum powdered and shaved up.
Lured by stories of wild goings-on at the Lawford house, the use of drugs, in the middle of it all, perhaps Marilyn Monroe and the charismatic Kennedy, Hoffa was inevitably fascinated. Both Kennedy brothers had been guests at the house. Hoffa saw potential scandal that could dim the Kennedy name. Hollywood private eye Fred Otash, who organized the bugging, says this of his former client.
You know, you talk about the mob. Hoffa was the mob. You can't be the head of the Teamsters Union unless you're approved by the mob. It's a whole big black circle.
I want a guy I can look up to and admire. But I don't want him to browbeat me. I want a guy who'll be sweet with me. But I don't want him to baby me either. I just gotta feel that whoever I marry has some real regard for me, aside from all that loving stuff.
Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy and his wife arrive in Tokyo for a Japanese goodwill visit on behalf of President Kennedy's New Frontier program.
The political enemies of the Kennedys, including Jimmy Hoffa, reserved a special distaste for Robert Kennedy as Attorney General, Chief of Law Enforcement. Hoffa heard rumors that the younger Kennedy had himself now become involved with Marilyn. Deborah Gould, Lawford's former wife, says the stories were true.
Strangely enough, from what Peter said, then Bobby got very infatuated. Then it led into an affair between Marilyn and Bobby.
Kennedy started showing up at Marilyn's apartment in Hollywood, according to her friend Jeannie Carmen.
I went to the door and I opened it up, and there stands Bobby Kennedy, and I go, boing. Marilyn came rushing out of the bathroom all of a sudden, and totally different than I would have expected her, because she had on this really cruddy white robe that she liked to wear, and she jumped into his arms, and they started kissing madly. And then they settled down, we all sat down, and we had another wine together, and she goes, which means, Jeannie, go back to your apartment, which I did.
The Lawford parties at the beach house continued, except that Marilyn now arrived not with the president, but with Robert Kennedy.
I know she was nuts about him because she told me, you know. I mean, she liked that mental part of it. She was fascinated by him. I think she was scared to death of him, because he gave this air about himself, and probably do a lot of people that way. I think he was nuts about her. She kind of teased him, but then she knew just how far to go, and then just kind of back off, you know. And she was kind of cute with him in a way, but she was nuts about him, yeah.
From long before the Kennedy presidency, Robert Kennedy's preoccupation had been to destroy the power of organized crime in America, the mob.
We were dealing with organized crime and big-time gangsters and hoodlums, as we had to deal with them in the days of Al Capone.
Robert Kennedy was chief counsel on the McClellan Committee, which in the late 50s interrogated labor leaders like Jimmy Hoffa and mobsters like Sam Giancana. The Teamsters, as run by Hoffa, Kennedy described as a conspiracy of evil. Hoffa and the mob, it seems, were straining for ammunition against the Kennedys. Today, one of those who tangled with Kennedy at the hearings lives in quiet retirement in Palm Springs. He took some interest in the political connections of Marilyn Monroe. He is Max Bloch, former president of the Meat Cutters Union, then known as Max the Butcher. He says he and Jimmy Hoffa heard of meetings between Marilyn Monroe and Robert Kennedy years before. They took place at the Desert Inn, Las Vegas, the very heart of mob territory. The date, Bloch claims, was 1957. His informant, the manager of the hotel, Wilbur Clark.
He told me that he checks him in every few weeks for a couple of days. Up on the 7th floor, I think he mentioned to me a suite of rooms. And that's it. And finally, one day, I'm sitting with him, and Bobby's passing by. I said, "Hello, Wilbur." I said, "Hello, Bobby." And my friend Max Bloch. "Oh," he said, "I know Bloch from New York." And he kept going. So I said, "Where is he running?" He says, "He's going to see Marilyn upstairs."
True or not, Jimmy Hoffa was certainly determined to acquire damaging evidence against the Kennedys. That is, evidence of sexual indiscretion. Chuck O'Brien, Hoffa's foster son and once trusted aide, insists he did hear about a Marilyn Monroe-Robert Kennedy connection starting in the late 50s.
There's no question about other people knowing about it. That type of information that would get back to people that were in the midst of trying to defend themselves from Bobby Kennedy.
I tend to have the impression left that's been stated publicly that I'm controlled by gangsters. I am not controlled by them.
In the climate of the times, proof of moral transgression by the upright Robert Kennedy might indeed have been damaging. Did Jimmy Hoffa have that information?
Yeah, I think he did. In fact, I know he did. You know, he had knowledge of it.
When I mentioned to Jimmy about Bobby and Marilyn Monroe, this is what he answered me. He said, "I know he's been screwing around with her for a long time."
Did you say that SOB, I'll break his back? Not concerning him, as far as I know of. Well, who did you make it about? I don't know. I may have been discussing somebody in a figure of speech. Well, who did you make the statement? Whose back were you going to break? I don't even remember it. Well, whose back were you going to break, Mr. Hoffa? Figure of his speech, I don't even know who I was talking about, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Hoffa wanted to neutralize Kennedy. He had a vendetta for him, and Kennedy had a vendetta for Hoffa.
No question about Hoffa, and don't you say that either. Don't you say that I'm a communist, or even affiliated with one. You said that enough around this country.
He hated him, of course. He ruined him. He the kind of him he got killed.
I think he felt if Bobby passed away that they have to hire pallbearers to put him in the ground, you know.
Suggested that they should sit down at the head of the restaurant and talk it over. To which Feldman replied, "Listen, there is only one solution. It's to break his neck for him."
An absolute spoiled brat, a man who never had to work, a man who had no principle, a man who would do anything to get himself a headline or a headline for his brother, and use the Teamsters as a stepping stone to get his brother elected and he'd become Attorney General. I had no respect for him then. I have no respect for his memory now.
Publicly, Hoffa denied ordering the bugging of Marilyn Monroe, but in summer 1961, he did summon private detective Fred Otash to a meeting in Florida. The topic would be Hoffa's campaign against the Kennedys. Also present was wiretapper Bernie Spindell, whose fame rested on his ability to eavesdrop on anybody or anything.
What Hoffa wanted was me to assist Bernie Spindell in developing a derogatory profile on Jack and Bobby Kennedy and their relationships with Marilyn Monroe, mainly, and any other women that might come into focus. And the strategy that was agreed upon was to use electronic devices. And the most logical place to set those devices was Peter Larford's home in Malibu.
November 1961, Jack Kennedy was back in Los Angeles talking about political extremism.
Men who are unwilling to face up to the danger from without are convinced that the real danger is from within. They look suspiciously at their neighbors and their leaders. They call for a man on horseback
According to the wiretappers, their eavesdropping operation was now working efficiently at the Lawford Beach House, where they claimed the president was still having occasional meetings with Marilyn Monroe. Technician John Danoff, stationed in a car nearby, taping signals from microphones hidden in the house, asked his boss, Fred Otash, whether it was really such a good idea to eavesdrop on the Kennedy brothers.
What he said to me was, what you don't know won't hurt you. And I said, well, I can get myself killed that way. And he so-called replied that what you don't know won't hurt you. You're getting paid, so just do your job and shut your mouth, which I did.
Otash confirms he did receive tapes of conversations inside the house.
Some with Jack Kennedy, some with Bobby Kennedy, some with Monroe, some with other people. And conversations on the phone as to arrangements and meetings that were going to be rendezvous with Jack Kennedy and Monroe, Jack Kennedy and other people, Bobby Kennedy and Monroe, and Bobby Kennedy and other people.
Did Jimmy Hoffa tell you that he actually did have the tapes in his safe?
Yeah, I knew he had them. Yeah, I knew he had the tapes. We had other tapes, too.
Do you think Jimmy Hoffa would have been prepared to have used that information if he'd had to against Bobby Kennedy?
I think so. I think so. He went too deep with him.
Surprisingly, Marilyn herself had already received some direct attention from the mafia. In late 1959, tailed by two agents from the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, she'd left a restaurant on Sunset Boulevard escorted by a young Italian with mob connections. The DA's men followed them over Coldwater Canyon, concerned that the mob's purpose might be to compromise or extort money from Marilyn. Later, it turned out that Marilyn had another, more important mob contact. Johnny Rosselli, the Chicago mob's man in Hollywood, knew her socially and the gossip about her. His boss was Sam Giancana, the head of the most powerful mafia family in the United States, and a man viciously opposed to the Kennedy brothers. This casino complex on the Rocky Heights over Lake Tahoe was one of the places where the mob kept watch on Marilyn Monroe. The Calneva Lodge, on the state line between California and Nevada, was to acquire somber significance in the last months of Marilyn's life. Advertised as a heaven in the high Sierras, it proved irresistibly attractive to entertainers, high rollers from Hollywood and Las Vegas, and gangsters. Frank Sinatra, who was buying the Calneva, had invited Marilyn Monroe and the cast of the Misfits to see him perform.
Blow, ill wind, blow away. Let me rest today. You're blowing me no good, no good.
It was the in place at Lake Tahoe, and the in place of the gambling casinos, because that's where the Klan hung out. That was Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, all the top gamblers from all over the world. The Calneva was the in place.
Amongst them was Sam Giancana, Mo to his friends, boss of the Chicago crime syndicate, and a prime target in the Kennedys' war on organized crime.
He was always dressed beautifully. Very high-class looking gentleman, you know.
Would you tell us whether if you have opposition from anybody that you dispose of them by having them stuffed in a trunk? Is that what you do, Mr. Giancana?
Decline to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate.
Will you tell us anything about any of your operations, or you just giggle every time I ask you a question?
Decline to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate me.
I thought only little girls giggled, Mr. Giancana.
At O'Hare Airport, Chicago, in July 1961, Giancana and his girlfriend, Phyllis McGuire, were cornered by FBI agents. McGuire was a singer, a member of the McGuire sisters, and friend of Marilyn Monroe. The FBI plan was to interview her about her relationship with the mafia boss, leaving Giancana to cool his heels in the airport terminal. The incident provoked an extraordinary outburst.
he asked me if I was going to make a report of my confrontation with him to my boss. And I said, my boss? Who's my boss? He said, J. Edgar Hoover. And I said, well, certainly I'm going to make a report of this. And he said, screw J. Edgar Hoover. And I said, all right, I'll tell him then. And then he said, are you going to make a report to your super boss? And I said, well, who would that be, my super boss? He said, Robert Kennedy. And I said, well, I'm sure he'll get a copy of that. He said, screw Robert Kennedy. He then said, what about your super boss? Are you going to make a report to him? And I said, who's my super boss? He said, John Kennedy, the President of the United States. And I said, well, he might get a copy, but on the other hand, I don't think John Kennedy is interested in Sam Giancana. He said, Romer, he said, you'll be surprised. He said, I know a hell of a lot of things about the Kennedy family, and Phyllis McGuire knows a hell of a lot of things about the Kennedy family. And one of these days, Romer, we're going to tell that story.
So did Giancana have something on the Kennedys? Certainly he shared a girlfriend with the president, one Judy Exner. FBI files reveal that he also talked of bugging the Attorney General. Today, Phyllis McGuire says she knew Marilyn quite well. She knew about her relationships with Jack and Robert Kennedy, who she says Marilyn wanted to marry. What Phyllis McGuire knew, Sam Giancana, the mafia boss of bosses, certainly knew too.
Whatever happened to flipping bubblegum cards? Or breaking a bottle of milk and being afraid to go home?
In September 1961, Los Angeles radio broadcaster Tom Clay began to get calls from a woman who said she was Marilyn Monroe.
Whatever happened to Good Night, Stars, I Love You? Or whatever happened to Starlight, Star Bright, First Star I See Tonight? Whatever happened to Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy?
Much moved by his talk of childhood, his own children, marriage, time past, the woman called Clay repeatedly. She seemed to be lonely.
As the aging hand of time runs her fingers through my hair, all I can think of is, whatever happened to Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep? I pray the Lord my soul to keep.
Finally, Clay arranged to meet the woman. It was indeed Marilyn Monroe.
I said, geez, I never imagined that anybody as famous as you could be bored or lonely. And she said, have you ever been in one room and felt loneliness? And I said, yeah. I said, I have. She said, multiply mine by 40 rooms, and then you'll have some idea as to how lonely I am. She seemed like a little girl, lost. Just like everything had passed her by.
By now, Marilyn's psychiatrist was writing of her depressive reactions, her inclination to suicide. Several years before, she'd emerged from a psychiatric clinic in New York after being treated for an undisclosed illness. Not schizophrenia, said a doctor, but she was psychiatrically disconnected. Marilyn complained that doctors and nurses had come to gawp at her, her arms bound, a curiosity piece. From inside she wrote, I'm locked up with all these poor nutty people. I'm sure to end up a nut if I stay in this nightmare. Please help me.
She wrote little verses that she'd occasionally mail to me, asked me if she had any talent as a great poet. And I would read them and comment on them. And one of the little things she wrote, just 3 lines. Help, 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 I feel life coming closer when all I want to do is die.
Marilyn's friends thought her film career was also showing signs of faltering. Back in Hollywood from the East Coast, at the start of what would be the last year of her life, she bought a small house quite unlike the ostentatious mansions of Beverly Hills. Under the door, an inscription read in Latin, Cursum Perficio, I'm completing my journey.
This was the last act for Marilyn. Maybe she sensed it because she'd come back to Hollywood defeated. You know, it's that kind of panic that happens when you feel that somebody has lost its power.
Marilyn was doing costume tests for the last film she would ever make, Something's Got to Give. Before filming began, the producer had personally rescued her from an overdose of barbiturates. She was ill and paranoid, he said. Filming began as it ended disastrously.
She was in a state of controlled desperation, as though she were almost beyond help. And yet, there she was, going through the daily routines of making rounds, seeing friends, and all the time she was, I think, sliding off.
Pleading ill health, Marilyn broke off filming to go to New York for President Kennedy's birthday salute. In front of 15,000 Democrats, she would sing Happy Birthday to the president.
She called me and was saying how frightened she was. And I said, well, I have a little present for you before you go. And I gave her, I went over and gave her a book that I had had as a child, which was The Little Engine That Could. And said to her, you know, look at this story. Here's an engine that wasn't sure that it was going to make it over the mountain with all the toys for the children. And it did.
Here she is.
Peter Lawford's running joke throughout the evening was Marilyn's ritual unpunctuality.
Anyway, Mr. President, because in the history of show business, perhaps there has been no one female who meant so much, who has done more. Mr. President, the late Marilyn Monroe.
It would be her last important appearance in public.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you. Going, Mr. President, for all the things you've done, the battles that you've won, the way you deal with U.S. Steel and our problems by the ton. We thank you so much. Everybody, happy birthday!
Historian Arthur Schlesinger met her at a party afterwards. One felt a terrible uncertainty, he wrote, as if talking to someone underwater.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Robert Kennedy had brought his wife, but the president came alone. Jackie Kennedy was riding in Virginia.
I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way.
Back in Hollywood, on the set of Something's Got to Give, shooting continued fitfully.
Everyone was very pleased because they felt that Marilyn was ready to work and wanted to work and looked good, except for the assistant director. Everybody else kept talking about her vulnerability and her fragility. All he saw was that she always got her own way. And kept saying, next to her, Lucretia Borgia is a pussycat.
In 35 days filming, Marilyn showed up only 12 times.
And there was this gradual sense of dissolution, of everything slipping away, kind of like the end of an era, like the fall of the Roman Empire.
On June the 1st, the day of her 36th birthday, Marilyn left the studio for the last time.
She had been to Dodger Stadium, where they had celebrated her birthday and she'd thrown in the first ball. And some weeks later, I had seen, she came over with pictures of that event. And I said, gee, I think these look really terrific. And she said, no, look at the eyes are dead.
Would you have lunch with me?
The producers of Something's Got to Give decided that Marilyn was acting in a kind of slow motion that was hypnotic.
I'd be so grateful if you'd take it out.
On June the 8th, she was fired. Meanwhile, Robert Kennedy was beginning to look as presidential as his brother. As their enemies uncomfortably noted, there was the prospect of Kennedy's occupying the White House for years ahead. The attempt to bug the Kennedys was unremitting. The wiretappers now tried to install microphones in Marilyn's home, hoping to eavesdrop on meetings with Robert Kennedy.
I received a call in the spring of 1962 to have Marilyn leave her home so that a group of people could come in there and bug her home, for purposes of getting evidence on Bobby Kennedy.
James says he turned the idea down flat. It was a criminal act. He wanted nothing to do with it. Out of work, Marilyn would visit a park in Beverly Hills, sit and watch children.
It was a children's playground, and she, for hours, could sit in the back of a tree, near bushes. She would hide, but she would watch those children for hours. The major frustration in her life was that she never had a child.
By now, Marilyn was frightened to use her phone at home. Her handbag full of change, she'd call friends from a payphone in the park. As she told Bob Slater, her former lover, she believed her phone was tapped.
She was very paranoid about the whole thing. More paranoid than I would say the average person would be, only because of the circumstances that led all the way to Washington. She was also scared. At one point, she told me that she was even scared for her life.
Marilyn, it seems, was right. According to our sources, technician Bernie Spindell had managed to place microphones in the house.
I think wiretapping, indiscriminate wiretapping, is very dirty business. And I couldn't agree more strongly. I think that penalties should be increased for those who use wiretapping without the control of some law enforcement agency.
In the war between the Justice Department and Jimmy Hoffa, both sides were bugging each other. According to Teamsters official Chuck O'Brien, Jimmy Hoffa made deliberate attempts to alarm Robert Kennedy. Speaking on a Teamsters phone line he believed bugged by the Justice Department, Hoffa boasted about having Marilyn and the Attorney General on tape. O'Brien says the message was supposed to get back to Robert Kennedy.
You could drop it on a phone and let it ride, and there's no question about it. The guy listening would bring it to his supervisor, and they'd mark it file, you know, for somebody's eyes only, and the word got back. It got back. There's no question about it.
There's no way of knowing whether Hoffa really made that threat, and if he did, whether it got back. What is certain is that Marilyn now complained she'd been told to steer clear of the Kennedys. Walking with friends on Laguna Beach, south of Los Angeles, she said Robert Kennedy had ended the affair.
She was frightened stiff. She was told that she could not contact now, then, or any time in the future, Washington, directly or indirectly, ever again.
To an extent, this is confirmed by Marilyn's confidential phone records. They show that in July she was making frequent calls to Washington, to the Justice Department switchboard. She complained to friends that Robert Kennedy had disconnected his private line and that the operators wouldn't put her through. Peter Lawford, according to his former wife, said Robert Kennedy broke off the affair precisely because he was afraid of pressure from the mob.
He mentioned gangster type of enemies, people that had a big pull and that that had actually maybe some information. And if they ever got a hold of anything like this would ruin his career forever. Not only his, but his brother's, who was the president at the time.
Jack Kennedy's close friend, Senator George Smathers, says he did hear talk of an affair with Marilyn being brought to a close.
I had heard, I think others had heard, that there was something like that going on, and that Kennedy had told Bobby to stop, to break it off.
But Smathers heard nothing of any mob pressure. Those who've tried to shed light on the next part of the story, the days before Marilyn's death, have not found it easy. Bob Slater, her former lover, trying to publish his own account of what happened, received mysterious telephone threats.
But let me tell you what's going to happen. This is straight from my friend. Yeah. You might as well grow a beard and move to Hardy, Arkansas, and not tell anybody where you are, because there'll be a contract out for you. Is there one now? You better believe it. You better believe it.
Slater claims that 10 days before she died, he drove Marilyn to Point Doom, north of Malibu, on Pacific Coast Highway. Sitting on the beach, she showed him a diary containing details of her meetings with Robert Kennedy.
She had entries in there that Bobby is out to get Jimmy Hoffa, and, quote, I'll put that SOB behind bars, or no what, something like that. She had entries in there regarding Bobby told me that he was going to have, Castro murdered. And the entries, most of them began with Bobby told me.
It's certainly true that mobsters Johnny Rosselli and Sam Giancana were then involved in a bizarre CIA plan to kill Castro, and that Robert Kennedy had learnt of the plan a couple of months earlier. The idea, it emerged later, was for the American mafia to assassinate Castro on behalf of the CIA. In return, they'd get back the Cuban casinos they'd run before the revolution. Slater could have got his story years later from published sources. However, if it's true, Marilyn had been told one of the administration's deepest secrets.
I told her that walking around with that was just like having a walking time bomb, and not to tell anybody else about it.
Worse still, Slater says, Marilyn talked of publicly disclosing her liaison with Robert Kennedy at a press conference.
She was going to tell of the promises that he had made to her, which she considered lies, and had misled her. She was going to tell about her affair with the two Kennedys, that's JFK and Robert Kennedy. And I had asked her if she had told this to anybody else, meaning about the press conference coming up on Monday morning. And she said, yes, I've told a few people. And I told her, I said that I thought that would be very, very dangerous. And she said, well, she didn't care at this particular point because she was going to come out and tell the truth because these people had used her. Now she was going to go and tell the real story.
She told Peter, this is it, that's enough. I'm going public with everything. I have been hurt enough. I've been used. Nothing but a person has been thrown from one man to another, and I've had it, and I'm going public with everything.
Hollywood, dawn on the 4th of August, 1962. Marilyn called her friend Jeannie Carmen.
I can't say it was a whiny voice. It was more of a frightened voice, a scared voice and very tired. She said she had not slept the entire night. And I said, what's going on, Marilyn? She said, well, I've had a phone call after phone call with some woman calling me and saying, you tramp, you no good, so-and-so. She said, leave Bobby alone, or you're going to be in deep trouble.
At 5 p.m., Marilyn's psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, was called to the house. On the phone, Marilyn had sounded drugged and depressed. She wanted to go for a walk on Santa Monica Pier, but was too groggy. She told Dr. Greenson that she'd had relationships with important men in government, that she'd been expecting to see one of them that night. Later, she declined an invitation to dinner at the Peter Lawford Beach House, and at 8 p.m. went to bed.
Marilyn came to her bedroom door. I was sitting in the living room, and she said, good night, Mrs. Murray. I think I'll turn in now. And she closed the door. And, of course, after that, I did the usual things about preparing the house for the night, and I went to my room eventually.
Deborah Gould claims that long afterwards, Peter Lawford broke down and drunkenly unburdened to her what really happened that night.
Marilyn immediately got on the phone to Peter, grasping out to inform him that she couldn't take any more and that she was going to be best for everybody that she died and that she was going to kill herself.
Sometime in mid-evening, I got a phone call from Marilyn, and she was quite distressed and said, please, Jeannie, please come over. And I said, I can't. And I said, I just can't come over today. And she said, could you bring me some sleeping pills? And I said, no, I can't do it tonight, Marilyn. I just can't.
In the midst of his dinner party, Peter Lawford, it seems, was equally unresponsive.
Maybe he didn't take her seriously. So nonsense, Marilyn. Pull yourself together. But my God, whatever you do, don't leave any notes behind.
Then he mentioned, he says, maybe I ought to go up there and see if everything's okay. I said, well, I don't know, Peter, whether you should do that at this time. I mean, we just don't, I'm sure everything's all right. If you go up there and if anything is going on, who knows what kind of a story this wind up being.
Years later, Lawford denied much of what Deborah Gould claims, but he did say he was the last person to talk to Marilyn and that he was consumed with guilt he hadn't immediately gone to her aid. At 3:30 a.m., alerted, she says, by some instinct, Mrs. Murray noticed the phone cord under Marilyn's door. Usually Marilyn disconnected the phone at night.
So, of course, I was alarmed. I called Dr. Greenson.
This is essentially the story Mrs. Murray has told for 23 years.
I went around to the front of the house before Dr. Greenson arrived.
The bedroom curtains were closed. She went to get a poker.
Turning the curtains back, I saw Marilyn lying on the bed, nude, and I was just alarmed.
Not long after 3:30, Dr. Greenson arrived. He went round to the side of the house, broke the bedroom window, and entered. He wrote later, I could see that Marilyn was no longer living. There she was, bare shoulders exposed, the phone clutched fiercely in her right hand. Marilyn's own physician, Dr. Hyman Engelberg, was summoned, and the police called at 4:25. However, this version has to be wrong in key respects. First, new evidence shifts events to a much earlier point in the evening. At 11 p.m. or earlier, Marilyn's press agent, Arthur Jacobs, and Natalie, his wife, attending a Henry Mancini concert in the Hollywood Bowl, were interrupted by a worrying message.
About 3/4 of the way through the concert, someone came to our box and said, Arthur, come quickly. And he didn't realize, and he said, Marilyn is dead or she's on the point of death.
The official police report accepts that Mrs. Murray's call to Dr. Greenson was at 3:35 a.m. However, the first police officer on the scene that night says he got quite a different story from Mrs. Murray. It all happened much earlier.
It was immediately after midnight.
And Dr. Greenson was present when she was telling you that?
Yes, he was.
And he didn't disagree?
No, he did not.
Mrs. Murray told us much the same thing. She actually became concerned about Marilyn earlier.
It was probably about midnight.
I asked them very pointedly why it took from midnight, approximately midnight or 12:30 till about 4:30 to call the police. I'm standing looking at two doctors, both of whom know that this is what we call a coroner's case. They know they have to notify the police, and it takes them 4 hours to get around to it.
Mrs. Murray now says she can't remember why she didn't call Dr. Greenson until 3:30.
That I don't know. I'll have to admit, I don't know.
85.
So what happened in the missing 4 hours? The most remarkable new evidence comes from Walt Schaefer, boss of the ambulance company called to Marilyn's house that night.
5, 6, 7, 36.
Far from being discovered dead, he says, Marilyn was still alive when the ambulance arrived.
We took Marilyn Monroe in on an overdose. And, of course, she succumbed at the hospital.
You mean that you were called to the house and you took her alive in
Yes.
coma?
In coma, yes. She was completely out.
In her interview with us, Mrs. Murray departed from the story she's told before. She now says a doctor was called before Marilyn died.
When he arrived, she was not dead. Because I was there then in the living room.
If Mrs. Murray is confused by age or failing memory, Walt Schaefer is adamant that Marilyn, still alive, was taken to Santa Monica Hospital, where she died. How come the reports of her death all said she died in bed at home?
Well, that is unbeknownst to me. I don't know.
So far as you're concerned, there is no doubt that she was picked up and taken to the
She was
hospital.
alive when she was picked up, yes.
Hospital records for that night no longer exist. It sounds unlikely Marilyn could have died without staff knowing who she was. Possibly she died on the way to hospital, though the autopsy disclosed no efforts to revive her. If Schaefer is correct, somebody unknown had to return the body to the house. By the time police arrived, rigor mortis had already set in. Marilyn had been dead for several hours. One theory is that the call to the police was deliberately delayed to give Robert Kennedy a chance to leave Los Angeles. Some mystery surrounds Kennedy's movements that night. The day before, the Kennedy family had arrived from Washington for a country weekend on a ranch just south of San Francisco. Their host was a respected San Francisco lawyer, John Bates, who says Kennedy couldn't possibly have slipped down to Los Angeles.
That afternoon, we all hiked up to the top of the ranch and had a big touch football game, which of course is typical family sport of the Kennedys. So it was a full active day.
But two sources in Los Angeles say the Attorney General arrived by helicopter in early afternoon near the Beverly Hilton. 82 years old, but apparently lucid, Eunice Murray, Marilyn's housekeeper, has always before denied any suggestion that Kennedy was in town.
Well, over a period of time, I was not at all surprised that the Kennedys were a very important part of Marilyn's life. And so that I was I wasn't included in this information, but I was a witness to what was happening.
And you believe that he was here that day?
At Marilyn's house?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
That afternoon?
Yes.
And you think that is the reason that she was so upset?
Yes, and it became so sticky that the protectors of Robert Kennedy, had to step in there and protect him.
Deborah Gould was told by Peter Lawford Kennedy did visit Marilyn that afternoon.
Marilyn was, from what Peter told me, knew then that it was over. That was it, over, final. And she was very, very distraught and depressed, and perhaps even suicidal at the time.
Peter Lawford's neighbor in Santa Monica, Ward Wood, recalls the afternoon of Saturday, August the 4th.
The car drove up and then people got out and I said, oh, there's Bobby Kennedy, and they went from the car to the house. That really is all that I saw.
You're absolutely convinced it was Bobby Kennedy?
Oh, I know it was Bobby Kennedy, yeah.
No question of doubt in your mind?
The only time that Bobby was out of my sight was from the time he went to bed, sometime after 10 o'clock. And when I saw him in the early morning at breakfast, and he was with me all the rest of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was Bobby Kennedy,
Well, he wasn't there.
But Deborah Gould and Detective Fred Otash tell approximately the same story, that Peter Lawford made hasty arrangements to get Robert Kennedy out of Los Angeles.
As I understand it, he left by helicopter.
Going where?
Back to San Francisco.
Around 3 a.m., a desperate Peter Lawford arrived at the Laurel Avenue office of Detective Fred Otash. He didn't realize Otash had earlier been involved in bugging his house. He wanted help.
Lawford showed up and completely disorientated and completely in a state of shock. One, saying that Marilyn Monroe was dead, that Bobby Kennedy was there, that he was spirited out of town by some airplane back up north, that they had gotten in a big fight that evening, and that he'd like to have me make arrangements to have someone go out to the house and pick up any and all information that was possible regarding any involvement between Marilyn Monroe and the Kennedys, whether it be diaries, whether they be notes, letters, etc.
According to Debbie Gould, Lawford had already done a rough search of the house to remove any connection with the Kennedys.
He said he went there. He tidied up the place and did what he could before the reporters and what have you found out about the death.
There was no mention of a suicide note?
No.
And you saw no note anywhere near the body?
No. I looked around for any notes, and I looked for any documents, and there were none in evidence.
Did she leave a note?
Yes, she did.
What did it say?
I don't know. No, it was destroyed.
It was destroyed. Who destroyed it?
I'm sure Peter did. He told me he did.
So another possible version of events that night goes like this. Marilyn, apparently suicidal after a visit from Robert Kennedy, calls Peter Lawford during the evening, time unknown. According to his later police statement, she says, "Say goodbye to the president and say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy." Lawford listens, then continues his dinner party. After trying to call Marilyn back, Lawford and others go to the house. Even though Mrs. Murray can't remember precisely who came to the house that night, others were there. Marilyn is found comatose, and the Schaefer ambulance called. The plan is to take Marilyn to Santa Monica Hospital, but attempts to save her life fail. Somebody puts her body back in bed. A helicopter chartered by Lawford takes Kennedy from the beach in front of the Lawford house back to Los Angeles Airport. Perhaps Dr. Greenson really isn't called until 3:30.
Marilyn Monroe is dead. We grasp at straws, as if knowing how she died or why might enable us to bring her back. Not since Jean Harlow have the standards of feminine charm been so embodied in the form of one woman. Whatever attracts man to woman, she possessed.
Joe Kennedy, the father of the Kennedy brothers, who'd suffered a stroke sometime before, heard the news at the family compound in Hyannisport. His chauffeur, Frank Saunders, was with him.
And all of a sudden, everything like just stopped, you know. Mr. Kennedy let out a few sounds. His eyes lit up, and he had these strange, icy blue eyes, and that told us it was time to leave. We did leave the pool shortly thereafter and went up to his room and put him back to bed and so forth. But at that time, everybody in the house had known that Marilyn was dead, and I might say it was like a morgue.
At 9:30 a.m. on the morning of Sunday, August the 5th, Robert Kennedy and his family attended Mass at a Catholic church in Gilroy, not far from the Bates Ranch.
Were you with Bobby when he heard of Monroe's death?
Yes, I believe we picked it up on the radio.
How did Bobby react to the news?
Well, I don't recall any specific reaction.
Early in the morning, police or FBI agents, nobody's quite sure, arrived at the offices of the telephone company in Santa Monica. The previous month, as we now know, Marilyn did make potentially embarrassing calls to the Justice Department. A telephone company executive, Robert Teox, told a local newspaper publisher what had happened.
He told me that he knew that the FBI had been into the general telephone offices and had taken the records of her calls that night. I had the impression that the general telephone didn't argue with the FBI.
Tipped off about Robert Kennedy's supposed helicopter flight, photographer Billy Woodfield drove out to Clover Field, the Santa Monica airport. He was going to see the owner of an air charter company often used by Peter Lawford.
He showed me his log. In the log, it showed that he had indeed picked up Bobby Kennedy at Peter Lawford's house on Sunday morning, somewhere around 2 o'clock. And he took him from Lawford's house to Los Angeles International Airport.
Police sources reported that Kennedy had been seen in Beverly Hills the previous afternoon. Los Angeles Police Chief William Parker discussed the case with Mayor Sam Yorty.
Chief Parker told me confidentially that Bobby Kennedy was supposed to be north of Los Angeles, some city, making a speech, but that actually he said he was seen in the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Los Angeles.
On the night that Marilyn died?
On the very night she died, yes.
Why do you think that so many witnesses in Los Angeles would have told us and told the police that Bobby Kennedy was in Los Angeles that day?
I just can't speculate on their misinformation or their bad information or their what they think they saw or what they think they knew. But there's just no way he could have been in Los Angeles, unless he had a twin.
Isn't it odd that two key members of the police department at that time, that is the police chief himself and the chief of detectives, would both have been of the view that Bobby was there if, in fact, there was no evidence?
I'd like to cross-examine them. I can't believe it.
From the start, the police investigation was overshadowed by rumors of Marilyn's political associations. It would be claimed that police and county officials had covered up the events of Marilyn's death to protect the Attorney General. There were claims of complicated murder plots involving the mafia, that far from overdosing on sleeping pills, barbiturates had been forcibly administered.
Marilyn Monroe was murdered. She did not commit suicide. The strongest evidence of that is very simply the fact that there was no barbiturates found in the digestive tract, yet there was a lethal dose in the blood. And it's quite out of the question to swallow enough barbiturates to cause your death and have it 100% removed from the stomach, the duodenum, etc., before death occurs. It can't happen. So that's the one thing that the fixers forgot to fix. And that's in the record now, and they can't wipe that out.
Clemens is wrong on key medical points. The absence of residue in the stomach doesn't in itself prove anything. However, laboratory tests that could have helped demolish the murder claims, tests that were suggested by the autopsy surgeon Dr. Thomas Noguchi, weren't done. John Miner from the district attorney's office attended the autopsy.
When I first saw Miss Monroe lying on the autopsy table, I was very sad. I felt that this untimely death of a person who had achieved what she had achieved was something that sort of represented the futility of life.
The final autopsy report gave the cause of death as acute barbiturate poisoning due to ingestion of overdose. The coroner said that Marilyn had swallowed Nembutal sleeping pills in one gulp in a period of seconds.
Any person who takes any depressing drug, the pattern of death is pretty much the same. They lose their ability to judge and to act. They lose muscular power, and they slip into coma.
Yet the medical evidence suggests she'd taken drugs hours before dying. There was no residue from the Nembutal capsules in the stomach. Other, now routine laboratory tests could have established whether swallowing Nembutal was indeed the cause of death. Noguchi, whose own work was highly competent, later sent organ specimens for microscopic analysis. But the specimens were destroyed before the tests were done.
That is a part of an autopsy, is doing the microscopic slides for diagnostic purposes and evaluation.
And why wasn't that done in this case?
I don't know.
Would you have wished it to be done?
Yes, indeed.
And Noguchi wished it to be done?
Yes.
And it would have been normally routine to have made that kind of examination?
That's true.
What happened to the medical photographs that were taken?
I have no idea.
But they seem not to exist anymore.
That appears to be true.
A fuller examination might have disclosed the missing residue. Instead, the field was left open for murder theorists who claim, for example, that Marilyn was injected with barbiturates by an unknown doctor, against her will. No injection marks were found, but because the lab tests weren't done, the coroner's investigation was inconclusive. It provides no final answers to those who allege that Marilyn did not commit suicide.
Crowds of the curious are held back at a respectful distance from the private funeral that Joe DiMaggio and others arranged for Marilyn Monroe. After services in the chapel of Westwood Memorial Cemetery, in which eulogies and passages from the scripture were read, the casket is placed in the hearse to be taken to a crypt on the nearby corridor of memories.
They came and they moved the flowers back off the coffin towards her toes, and they unlocked it with all its clanking sounds and removed the cover and laid it open. And with that, out popped a shock of blonde hair. And I was horrified that they had opened the coffin, and I was horrified that anybody would let them do that. they changed the ropes of where the press corps was kept. And with that, these herd of elephants came trampling over flowers, over people's graves. They didn't care where they were to just get one more shot. All in all, it was an extremely depressing day.
Dr. Greenson found it hard to accept that his patient had committed suicide. After Marilyn's death, John Miner went to see him.
Based on the content of that conversation with Dr. Greenson, I wrote a memorandum in which I indicated, at least, that I did not believe that Marilyn Monroe committed suicide.
And that was Dr. Greenson's opinion?
That was Dr. Greenson's opinion as well, yes.
Miner says that for reasons of professional ethics, he can't disclose what Greenson said. Perhaps what he meant was that Marilyn had overestimated her capacity for sleeping pills. Sometime later, caught on the phone by a reporter, Dr. Greenson expressed his frustration at not being able to talk about the case.
I can't explain myself or defend myself without revealing things that I don't want to reveal. I feel like I can't, you can't draw a line and say, well, I'll tell you this and I won't tell you that. It's a terrible position to be in, to have to say I can't talk about it because I can't tell the whole story.
Greenson ended the conversation by advising the reporter to talk to the Attorney General.
Listen, talk to Bobby Kennedy.
In 1982, the District Attorney's Office looked into the case. Their inquiry failed to support any evidence of criminal misconduct. However, William Parker's successor as police chief is deeply critical of the way police conducted the original investigation.
One of the reasons advanced for the highly secret nature of this investigation was that there could be some type of national security problem in connection with the association between a national figure and a highly publicized entertainer.
Chief Parker, says Reddin, handled the case with extreme and quite unnecessary discretion.
It was treated as an intelligence division operation, and logically it could be so treated because there was the involvement of the Attorney General of the United States. They treated it as a 100% intelligence operation, and those operations are highly secret.
I began to wonder if they didn't have a file over there on Marilyn's death and all about it, so I sent over to the police department for it, and they told me there wasn't any file. So I thought that maybe Chief Parker had taken the file to his home, but I never followed that up because I didn't want to bother Mrs. Parker. But that was my assumption, that there was a file, but it was taken out of the police department.
But as mayor, you had the right to require the police department to give you any file they had, didn't you?
Well, they sent me any file I asked for, always.
Surely they wouldn't have gone so far as to have lied to the mayor, would they?
Oh, they very possibly would have, sure. It's easier to say there is no file than it is to say there's a file, Mr. Mayor, and you can't have it.
Recently, however, the police department released the supposed file on Marilyn Monroe's death. It includes a rebuttal of an ancient magazine article and a handful of detectives' reports. Reddin dismisses it as obviously incomplete. He wants to know the reason for the secrecy.
If there was a national security implication, certainly put it under wraps. If there was none, I would see no reason for keeping it under wraps.
And frankly, what do you think the national security consideration was?
I don't see any.
The story of his involvement with Marilyn Monroe was to haunt Robert Kennedy.
And if I'm elected President of the United States, I'm going to come back to cities and communities such as this. I'm going to come back to communities such as North Platte.
When he ran for president in 1968, an unofficial Republican group decided to buy the rumored tapes. A right-wing journalist called Ralph de Toledano was asked to help. An investigator was sent to California. He reported the tapes were available from a former policeman.
He called me back and he said he'd located the cop. The cop had the tapes, had verified their validity, and wanted $50,000 for the tapes. And I told him, well, you get in touch with this group. I don't want any part of it. And he did, and they said it would take them perhaps a couple of days to raise the $50,000, but the deal was there. And that night, Bobby was shot and killed.
Oh, my God. Senator Kennedy has been shot. And another man, a Kennedy campaign manager, and possibly shot in the head. I am right here. Rafer Johnson has a hold of a man who apparently has fired the shot.
Had Bobby not been shot, I am convinced that those tapes would have been used, they would have been duplicated and sent around the country to various newspapers and would have had tremendous impact in the coming campaign.
Stay away from the gun. His hand is frozen. Get his thumb. Get his thumb.
Mr. President, the late Marilyn Monroe.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
The wonder